But we've had public health authorities acknowledge that, yes, the COVID vaccines can cause myocarditis. They can cause blood clots. After all, AstraZeneca and J&J COVID-19 vaccines were taken off the market for blood clots. And so there's been some acknowledgement of these types of vaccine injuries. Now, of course, where they lie to us about them is that they tell us that these kinds of injuries are rare. And in the case of myocarditis, they say they're mild, that, the young men who come down with these myocarditis cases, that it's mild and that it resolves on its own. And we see that that's not true, that we see young people collapsing with sudden cardiac arrests. They're collapsing in school, on the field. They're collapsing playing basketball, football. Some of them are dying in their sleep. And so, of course, that's all being denied by the health authorities. But at least there's an admission that the COVID vaccines can cause myocarditis and blood clots. That's not the case with the cancers. And the cancers that I've seen after COVID vaccination are very different from anything I've ever seen in my career. And I've diagnosed tens of thousands of cancer cases in my career with CT, with PET CT, with MRI. And I've never seen cancers like this. These cancers, they're showing up in young people in their teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, and they're showing up at end stage. So they usually show up at stage 3 or stage 4. So they're already very advanced. They grow very rapidly. And this is one feature that is fascinating because oncologists are not expecting these cancers to grow this quickly. And you'll see these testimonials when people usually they'll establish GoFundMe pages to help them with expenses, especially in the United States. There's expenses associated with cancer care. And they'll tell the stories that my oncologist was shocked by the rate that, my tumor grew. Or the oncologist will be preparing a treatment plan for them, surgery and potentially chemotherapy. And while they're preparing the treatment plan, the cancer's grown even further, much more quickly. And then the oncologists are scrambling to change their treatment plan to adjust for these very aggressively, rapidly growing cancers. And usually the oncologists can't keep up with the cancer itself. Even if they start chemotherapy, it may work only partially, or it may not work at all. So another feature of these cancers is that they seem to be resistant to conventional chemotherapy and radiation therapy. And that's another feature I noticed that was very unusual. And so these cancers have been called turbo cancers. It's not a medical term. It's not a term anyone will find in the literature. And I get thrown that, by the naysayers that they'll say, well, look, turbo cancer as a term doesn't exist in the literature. Well, yes, it's a brand new phenomenon and hasn't been named yet. It is barely being even studied. In fact, doctors are being threatened and they're being discouraged from even acknowledging the existence of these turbo cancers after COVID vaccination. And so, the article that you showed, I've written about 20 articles about turbo cancers so far. It's based on anecdotes that I'm seeing at the ground level, individual stories. And, when you see a young 30-something-year-old woman present with, end stage 4 breast cancer that claims her life within 6 months, that's something you're supposed to see maybe once or twice in your career. These are supposed to be very rare stories. I'm not supposed to be able to collect dozens and dozens of these stories. And of course, these individuals are all vaccinated. They've all been forced to take COVID vaccines to keep their jobs. And so I've published about doctors coming down with these turbo cancers, nurses. That article was picked up by Vigilant Fox, and, got a very wide viewership. Recently, I focused on teachers, and there's other vaccine mandated professions where I'm seeing an explosion of these cases: police officers, firefighters, military, and so on.
And so, when you say that you treated tens of thousands, you diagnosed tens of thousands of cancers, and that you haven't seen this, is it in particular? Is it just the rapid rate of the formation of the cancer, or in combination with the fact that you can't treat them in the same way that oftentimes as you would have previously, right, with say chemo